Okay, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being with us one more time. We're going to have a great panel today. We're going to be speaking today about what is the perspective from the entrepreneur point of view. But before that, in Ecuador, we had some updates on what is happening. The President Moreno, spoke this morning about the cuts on the budget for the public sector. Also, he was speaking about the what is basically going to happen with the gas price is coming down. But all that, it is always a challenge for everyone running a business. In this time, in this opportunity, we have three guests. First, we have Jason. Jason has been helping us, and you probably know him. He has been acting as moderator of the questions on our few since the beginning events. So Jason, he's here. He has been living here for almost 12 years, well, more than 12 years. And right now he's working at Natin Blooms. This is a flower plantation. It was founded in 1996, and they have farms in Cotopaxi and Cayambe. So Jason is going to be speaking to us about from the flower business perspective. Also, we have Paty Flor. Paty, thank you for accepting our invitation. And Paty is she's a leader on the healthy food. It is not an industry because it is not massive, but how I call this is like she's trying to promote the healthy food, healthy nutrition in Manta. She owns a business which is called Sin Calorías, no calories, and she's going to be talking to us about her challenges and what is happening with her business during COVID and what is her perspective after COVID-19. And also we have 𝐏𝐀𝐄𝐑. Noel, thank you for making the time to be with us. You a little bit to speak about Noel. He's the representative for Neo in Ecuador. This company, it is a energy production, renewable energy production, and they have a presence in 14 countries right now, from Australia, Argentina, Jamaica, and this is a France-based company. And probably you, Noel, are going to explain us more about it. What are the current projects? I was making a little bit of research on what are you doing in Australia and also in Argentina. It is very nice. Actually, I didn't know that much about this project here in Ecuador, but I think it is great to have these type of initiatives here. And also, what is happening right now? What is happening with the COVID restrictions? So we will see. So I would like to start this with Jason. Jason, can you please tell us more about what are you doing right now and the flower business perspective?
Okay, everybody can hear me? Can everybody hear me? Okay, sorry about that. We had some technical difficulties. Yeah, so like Marcos explained, I work for a company, a cut flower, actually a rose company here in Ecuador. We own and operate 2 farms. The company is called Native Blooms. So what I would like to do today in my role as one of the panelists is give you a little bit of a panoramic about how the flower industry works in Ecuador, a couple facts about the volumes that we do and where it is we actually export to, some of the difficulties that we've experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic, and then a quick little synopsis of looking forward and what are some of the creative ways the flower industry here in Ecuador is trying to combat the pandemic, the inevitable economic lull, and how we're looking to creatively find solutions to come out of this on top. So yeah, real quick, just a little bit about the flower industry here in Ecuador. Ecuador is the third largest producer of cut flowers in the world, behind Colombia and Holland. Currently in Ecuador, under production, there are roughly 11,000 acres of cut flowers. This includes roses, hydrangeas, lots of summer flowers like lilies, things like that. Everything that you could imagine being able to purchase in North America is grown in Ecuador and other South American countries as well. Let's see, 73% of the cut flowers that are exported from Ecuador are roses. Ecuador is known throughout the world as the world's leader in rose cultivation. Ecuador produces the world's best rose. And it's an industry that is significantly dominated by women. The majority of the people that work on the flower farms are women. More often than not, single parent families supporting at least one child, in many cases, few children. And these are women that are heads of their households, mothers, and earners for their family as well. The flower industry, the commercial flower industry here in Ecuador, is responsible for approximately $873 million in revenue annually. So it's quite significant. It's quite a impulse into the Ecuadorian economy, and either directly or indirectly employs roughly 300,000 people. Now, those could be employees that work directly on the farm, or indirectly through logistics providers, material providers, freight forwarding agencies, what have you. So it's a very significant industry here in Ecuador. As far as markets to where we export, the US is one of the largest markets with about 40% of the market share. The United States, well, North America, for that matter, receives about 40% of what we produce here in Ecuador, with Russia falling in second at 23%. And yeah, a little bit of information about how people spend money on flowers in the States. It's a $26 billion industry annually in the States. Flower products, from cut flowers to vases to glassware to events, weddings, what have you. So it's quite a significant industry, which of course has been affected by the current pandemic. And Ecuador is a major contributor to the US market. So that's a little bit of a panoramic on how cut flowers operates here in Ecuador. And now I'd like to address some of the challenges. So like many industries in Ecuador, the cut flower industry has been severely impacted by the pandemic. You could argue that more so than others because we depend heavily on air freight, airplane travel to be able to move our products from one continent to the next. So back in mid-March, when we had a 2-week shutdown, essentially, all planes were grounded. We at the flower farms were not able to export our products, and it created essentially a backlog for our perishable products. So it was very challenging to deal with the 2-week shutdown. Since then, there has been some cargo airline movement, and we've been able to operate. Approximately 15% of the normal frequency of planes operating currently. So we're able to export, but at a reduced amount, of course. Unfortunately, all of this pandemic fell during a very important holiday for us in the cut flower trade, which is Mother's Day, which was the 10th of May. So Mother's Day represents approximately 40% of our business annually, of our revenue annually. So we had to kind of juggle creative ways to export flowers to the States and different markets. We were able to do so by purchasing space on humanitarian flights, cargo airplanes that were coming down to South America and delivering products. We then purchased space to ship cut flowers back to the States. So anyway, we had to be very creative in our ways to find ways to ship freight over to the United States and other countries. So yeah, it's been challenging. I think that Mother's Day was not the large flower holiday that we all expected, but as florists and wholesale flower shops in the States start to open, they're doing curbside pickup, they're doing online ordering, and as the flights start to open up with a little bit more frequency, we have noticed that the industry is starting to rebound, which is a good thing, step by step, but we're starting to see a little bit more revenue generated. And as far as next steps and combating the current pandemic and falling in line with some of the biosecurity procedures and the new normal that we're going to be faced with moving forward, flower farms, especially the one I work for, we initially had to send a lot of staff home. The operation is very large. We have approximately 300 people working at the farm, and they all work in essentially a large area where we do quality control, packing, sorting, processing of the flowers. So of course, it's a large number of people in a reduced space. So to combat that, we have brought back a lot of staff, fallen in line with the biosecurity procedures, keeping at least a 1.5 meter distance between people, masks, the hazmat suits to prevent contact. So that's all moving forward positively, and things are operating. Like I mentioned earlier, flower shops in the States, in North America predominantly, have started to open. So we have clients to sell to. And one other thing that I wanted to touch on, which is kind of interesting, is a lot of industries throughout Ecuador are starting to look at ways to diversify. If their main source of income has been impacted by COVID, they're looking at opportunities to diversify and expand their product offering. So one of the interesting things that we as an industry are looking at is getting into the cultivation of hemp. Now, the Ecuadorian government in December has approved the use of hemp CBD products in Ecuador, and in July, the General Assembly will hopefully determine what the laws will be, what the taxation will be concerning the use of CBD hemp in Ecuador. So flower farms are in a unique position to enter into that market. We, of course, have all the infrastructure, greenhouses, irrigation, the land, the favorable growing areas to do so. So it's been a really interesting kind of potential industry that the flower farms could shift into to be able to diversify their product offerings and kind of lessen the dependency on export flowers during this current pandemic. So yeah, I guess in closing, in summation, it's been challenging for the flower industry as well as many other industries here in Ecuador, but we've been able to adapt we've been able to adhere to biosecurity procedures and kind of fall in line with protecting our staff and our people. And another wonderful piece of news is that the flower shops in the States are starting to open and are able to receive products. So we're pushing forward and hoping that every day gets a little bit better.
Thank you, Jason. Jason, actually, we have two questions for you. First one is, Jason, is it true that most of the flowers in the Rose Parade originate from Ecuador? Do you know that?
Okay, so if we're talking about the Rose Parade in Los Angeles, then the answer, I think we are. In Pasadena, yes. The answer is yes. Ecuador is, like I mentioned earlier, a huge partner for the US in the commercial cut flower trade. So a lot of the big events that you see, or even, you know, break it down to like a Whole Foods market, for example, in the States, the flowers you see in a bouquet, more often than not, have come from Ecuador.
Okay, and you mentioned something about CBD. Are you familiar already about what will be the? I mean, because in the flower industry, you have some type of measurements. You have okay, this specific flower, it grew like this height. And do you have any idea on how the CBD industry is going to be working for you? Because I think that's the next move, because we have some competitors in this here, like Colombia, Uruguay. So Ecuador, it is the perfect place to grow this type of, I mean, to start with this new type of business.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with you, Marcos. I think that Ecuador is poised to be able to enter into this market. Of course, other Latin American countries like Uruguay and Colombia are ahead of the game in a sense. They've already legalized the use of medical marijuana. But I think that Ecuador, with its vast infrastructure in the commercial flower industry, is well suited to enter into this market. I think that the largest obstacle is going to be figuring out how to administer the regulations here in Ecuador and taxation and what have you. So that, as far as I understand, is what the General Assembly will be discussing in July, hoping that that happens. Now, flower farms across Ecuador are located in either roughly 2 hours south of Quito or 2 hours north. Both areas very close to the equator, very favorable growing conditions, ideal for a medical marijuana growing operation. And with the vast infrastructure, I think making derivatives from hemp, oils, tinctures, et cetera, is not far-fetched, but we of course have to see what the Ecuadorian government stance will be. And another interesting caveat is whether or not this will be an exportable product, because that becomes very interesting to be able to open up global markets.
Okay, all right. Thank you. We have another question, but I think we're going to leave it to the end, because I would like to continue with Paty Flor. So, Jason, are you going to be helping us?
Yes, I'm going to translate.
Okay.
So Paty's going to talk and I'm going to translate.
Okay, all right. So Paty, thank you again for being with us today. The last few weeks, with all those curfew regulations, it has been challenging for a business like yours. I would like you to explain us a little bit what is your business model, and also how have you been affected in the first place, but after that, how did you solve that, and how do you see the future? Because as far as I know you will be creating something new to overcome on the regulations on the new normal, as everyone is saying. So, Paty, please. Jason.
Ok, Paty, por favor, conversanos un poco sobre tu emprendimiento, tu negocio, tu empresa. Las dificultades que has tenido con el toque de queda y el horario reducido como para trabajar en sí. Y un poco de tus ideas y iniciativas como para combatir la nueva normalidad que nos enfrenta apenas termine el toque de queda.
Okay. Hola, mi nombre es Paty. Hace 3 años exactamente tuve una idea de un negocio aquí en Malta de comida saludable, porque vi una necesidad, ya que no teníamos...
Sí, okay. Sí. Okay, so her name is Paty. About 3 years ago, she decided to start a new project, a new food service here in Malta, offering healthy food options to the citizens of Malta.
Okay. La idea de esto era que las personas tengan un hábito de vida, una mejor forma de comer, crearles una necesidad. Muchas personas se preocupan por su trabajo, niños, miles de cosas en el día. Entonces, estábamos teniendo una cantidad de personas que estaban comiendo mal en la calle, cualquier cosa, por decirlo así. Entonces, a ese tipo de personas íbamos a estar enfocados.
Okay, so Malta is a city where people are very physically active. They practice a lot of different sports. So Paty was able to identify that there was a need, there was an opportunity in the market because you know, people are busy, they have jobs, they have their children, they might not be able to cook healthy meals all the time. So they would, you know, grab something quick at a restaurant. So she decided to offer healthy food deliveries as an option.
Okay, poco a poco fuimos creciendo, no solamente personas de oficinas requerían nuestro servicio, sino personas con preferencias que se cuidaban, personas fitness o personas que tenían restricciones alimenticias, diabéticos, celíacos, personas con problemas del corazón, de los riñones, que necesitaban una alimentación estrictamente saludable.
Okay, so she's been able to kind of tailor their offerings to the different needs of their clients. So they were able to start initially with you know, people that have office jobs that aren't particularly able to go and have a sit-down lunch. So they would deliver a healthy option to them at their office, and also offering meal plans to people that have different dietary restrictions, whether it's purely a health initiative, or they're diabetic, or they have different dietary restrictions where they need to eat a certain item. Paty's able to offer that type of service as well.
Ok, luego de esto fuimos creciendo y gracias a Dios nos ha ido muy bien. De hecho, ya tenemos innovación desde postres, no solamente planes de alimentación, postres que sean para personas veganas, postres que sean libres de gluten, de azúcar, de lactosa. Tenemos una carta muy grande y bueno, esto del coronavirus nos ha afectado mucho porque las personas vienen hasta donde yo estoy, o sea, mis trabajadores. Entonces es en mi casa que yo tengo un espacio para que ellos, o sea, para trabajar.
Okay, so she's been able to grow pretty consistently over the last 3 years. Recently, they've been able to add a healthy dessert line. The majority of the offerings are vegan options, low in sugar, you know, using natural ingredients. And Of course, with the with the pandemic, with the arrival of COVID-19, it's severely impacted her business because the group of people that form Sin Calorías, Paty's business, work from her home. They commute to her home and prepare all the food in her home, so it's been challenging.
Ok, bueno, me tocó parar temporalmente y en este lapso de tiempo he sacado nuevos postres, nuevos sabores y captar la atención de los clientes. Ellos han reaccionado bien, he tenido, bueno, pedidos y también me ha dado tiempo de crear un plan post cuarentena. Ahorita actualmente estoy mejorando lo que es calidad de los productos, es decir, que estoy con una serie de proveedores con productos orgánicos que van a ayudarme para los planes de alimentación.
Okay, so during the shutdown, unfortunately, she's had to stop delivering the healthy food options, the prepared meals, the lunches and dinners to her clients. What she has been able to continue is the branch of healthy desserts, which she's preparing in-house with the same ingredients and same kind of acceptance of her clients. That's been able to continue. They've been able to deliver and meet that market need. And also during the shutdown, she's been able to kind of refine her list of providers, working the majority of which are organic ingredients providers, and being able to kind of improve the menu options moving forward with her plan post-COVID.
Uh-huh. Bueno, no solamente nos vamos a enfocar en variedad, sino también en calidad. Nosotros tenemos que ya empezar a cuidarnos mucho mejor que antes, porque nuestro sistema inmunológico es el que nos va a permitir saber si vamos a seguir o no. Entonces, a eso me he enfocado. Voy a hacer unas publicaciones, bueno, voy a trabajar mucho con la publicidad para captar clientes. Sé que va a ser un riesgo porque muchas personas ahora están cuidando su bolsillo, pero esto poco a poco va a ir creciendo. Hay mucha visión y sé que va a resultar.
Okay, so Paty feels very strongly that moving forward as we kind of navigate the current pandemic, taking care of your immune system is going to be paramount. So eating healthy, getting the right amount of minerals, vitamins, taking care of your body is going to be high on people's priority list. So she feels that her product offerings post-COVID are going to fall right in line with what a lot of people are going to be thinking about as far as taking care of their health. She's also aware that with kind of the economy going through some pitfalls moving forward, that a lot of people are going to be thinking about their bottom line. Notwithstanding, she feels that it's going to be a great option for people to remain healthy moving forward, and putting the right type of food into their bodies and keeping their immune system healthy.
Okay. Bueno, y el proyecto es empezar a crecer en Puerto Viejo. Entonces ya tengo un contacto en Puerto Viejo que vamos a tener una sucursal allá de postres, de comida. Estamos estudiando la idea de que sea con el mismo nombre o no, porque ya tuve una experiencia, entonces no quiero arriesgar el nombre Sin Calorías, que ahorita en Manta, o sea, tiene un nombre puesto por calidad, por servicio, y lo va a manejar otra persona en esta ciudad, entonces tengo que cuidar calidad y presentación y servicio, entonces todo se iría en las manos de esta persona.
Okay, so one of Paty's post-COVID plans is to expand. Currently, the products are being offered exclusively in Manta, but moving forward, as some of the curfew regulations start to loosen a bit, the next destination will be the city of Puerto Viejo. Puerto Viejo will be an addition to the product offering for Sin Calorías, and they're hoping to expand into that city as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, Paty, I have a question for you. I mean, Ecuador, it is a developing country, which we're still working on some of our laws. And I wanted to ask you, and I don't know if this is I don't know how to word this in a good way, but being a woman and this very very male or machista culture of Ecuador in general, those has been a challenge for you. I don't want to get into too much details on that, but what I believe is that, and I can see one of our attendees, they own hostels, they own restaurants here, and a little bit about your perspective of how it is to develop a business, and if you have faced some restrictions, people saying no, I mean, we're not going to buy from you for any other reason, not just your woman. So I would like you to speak to our attendees, because most of them, keep in mind that most of them, they're expats. This is a new culture for them. And from your perspective, you've been from here, been living in Ecuador your entire life. How do you face those problems? Like, you have them.
Ok, traduzco. Okay. La pregunta en sí es, bueno, si puedes ampliar un poco sobre los desafíos que posiblemente hayas tenido en posicionar tu emprendimiento. Arrancar como mujer en el ámbito de comida saludable, cómo han sido las dificultades que hayas tenido en la trayectoria.
Ok, sí fue un poco difícil, ya que yo no soy de Manta, no viví aquí, prácticamente era una persona nueva, que empecé a conocer personas, empecé a conocer la ciudad, empecé a conocer las necesidades. Entonces, sí fue un poco difícil porque conseguir proveedores se me dificultó, conseguir clientes también, pero empecé, me acuerdo que con 7 clientes y di todo de mí para crecer. Entonces, mi visión no era lucrarme, sino era cambiar la mentalidad de muchas personas, que piensen que, ok, voy a comer saludable, comer malo. No, sino comer también rico, variado. Entonces, fui creciendo, se fue regando la voz de que era un buen servicio, era calidad, y me fue yendo bien. Al principio fue muy difícil, había noches que madrugaba haciendo postres o dejando todo listo, pero poco a poco se fue dando. Ya tengo casi 3 años, manejándolo sola casi 2 años, y hasta la vez me ha ido muy bien, por eso quiero seguir innovando, seguir dando a conocer nuevos productos, nuevas cosas, para no aburrir al cliente, para tener más opciones y para ir creciendo, porque esa es la idea. Crear una necesidad siempre, que los clientes o que las personas te necesiten alimentarse bien, necesiten que los atiendas, necesiten calidad, necesiten servicio. Buscando eso, el negocio nunca va a morir.
Okay, and I have a final question. Sorry, Jason, I think you have a question. You have a follow-up on that.
Traduzco.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, so essentially, like any entrepreneurial project, you know, Paty went through ups and downs, pitfalls, and successes. Initially, she started out with 7 clients, of which the idea was to provide a healthy service and make sure that it was consistent, you know, week in and week out. and follow up on her product offering. So it's been 3 years. They've gone through a lot of challenges, but ultimately they've been able to grow at a steady rate. One of the biggest challenges initially was finding suppliers, finding vendors to offer natural food options, healthy meals, organic providers. That was a challenge. They do exist, but it takes a little while to kind of seek them out. So those were the challenges, and she's still here today and looking to keep innovating to keep clients interacting with her business.
Yeah, I think that's great, Paty. I think a lot of people here identify with you with, running a business. It is not always it's not always very easy. But I think you have been doing great, and I'm pretty sure that you will continue doing it. And I would like to continue right now with Noel. And I can see other questions for Paty here, but Noel, I made a brief introduction on what your company, what do you do in your what your company does, and could you please tell us? I know you have been traveling a lot. You have been living in Ecuador for several years, and what is your perspective for what is happening for your business, especially because it is very important because of the oil prices are so, they change so much that another source of energy for Ecuador will be great. So could you please tell us your general idea on what is happening right now?
Yeah, hey, just checking in if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Well, thanks for having me, and thanks to the other panelists as well. So yeah, my name is Noel 𝐏𝐀𝐓𝐘. I work for 𝐂𝐀𝐋𝐎𝐑. Currently, I'm the director of Ecuador, and we focus on large-scale industrial renewable energy, mostly solar and wind power, as well as storage. As you noted, we have projects all over the world, and we're one of the leading renewable energy companies in terms of solar, wind, and storage in many countries, sort of world throughout. So instead of discussing our portfolio, I'll kind of get into more about what we do and why it might be interesting for your listeners. My point of view is generally from the large scale infrastructure perspective, and so it's applicable not only to energy projects, but also to highways, hospitals, ports, energy, water treatment, etc. I should also, normally I start these speeches off actually in the last 2 months with apologies that I'm on a farm and also surrounded by my kids, so you're bound to get some interesting noises, and I apologize for that. But so anyone listening and wondering sort of about what's going to happen in Ecuador about long-term infrastructure, if you're building it, if you're dependent upon it, very likely, and also if you're a smaller entrepreneur that survives off it. So we're talking lawyers, accountants, construction companies, you name it. These large infrastructure projects are usually $100+ million. The projects we're looking at are around $1 billion in Ecuador, and so they bring a lot of services for entrepreneurs down the as you get down the chain. Right now, we're focusing on 2 major projects: a 110 megawatt wind project and a 200 megawatt solar project in Ecuador. The solar project's in Manabí, and the wind project's up in Loja. The hope is to start diversifying the grid a little bit in Ecuador, so that you're right, there's a certain dependence upon conventional oil sources and conventional thermal energy still on the grid, currently quite cheap, but very volatile. And so you've seen periods in the last decade where it's spiked up very high, and of course that affects the overall grid mix and the cost of energy to the end consumer. But I think sort of more importantly and more interesting, I think, for everyone is sort of to think about Ecuador and what it takes to get these large scale investments into the country, because in a sort of post-COVID world, there's definitely going to be some changes, and I think we heard them sort of in a previous panel that you had as well from a macroeconomic standpoint. But one thing to remember is that these projects, because they're $250 million investment, generally the payback period is over 20 to 25 years, and you might not even have your your initial investment back for 10 or 15 years, let alone start making money. And so you have to remember that you're surviving various changes of government over that period of time. And anyone that's lived in Ecuador for a long time knows that the changes of government are not subtle; they're generally fairly strong. And what that means is that in countries like Ecuador and other developing countries where we do large scale infrastructure investment, there's a there's a set of bankability rules that we look to be in place before we get there. And Ecuador specifically has sort of suffered a little bit that the top-down regulations and law in Ecuador are not geared towards private investment in large scale infrastructure. The large scale infrastructure projects have mostly been promoted by public projects, which is fine as well, but they haven't been geared towards getting the private investment rushing into the country. And so what that means is that because the top-down structure of the legal system is not geared towards it, it means the bottom-up structure of creating those contractual securities that are required to make sure that essentially all we're asking is that the investment rules that are set in place when we build the large-scale infrastructure don't change over time, and so, or if they do change, that they're compensated. So I'll give you a couple examples. If we're to build a large-scale energy project and we're to put a tariff and they pay us a certain amount of money, but then the next year there's a 50% increase in the corporate taxes, then that wipes out your return. And so we really look for stability of law and stability of tax, because we need to survive. We're not looking for a 2 or 3 year business model. We're putting capital at risk in place of the government having to do so for 10, 15, 20, 25 years. And so the idea is that we have that sort of long-term security in place. And again, Ecuador has struggled a little bit to attract this type of capital. So what do we need in a post-COVID Ecuador? Well, there's two interesting things going on. From a macroeconomic standpoint, you have the barrel of oil, crashing down, as we know, unfortunately, and we've seen, it teeter up a little bit, but certainly nowhere near what is required to balance the budget in Ecuador, and that pains me, but that's the facts. And then in order to cover this current capital gap for the government, you can see that the current administration is having to take on additional emergency loans from the BID and the IMF and do some restructuring in order to make sure that the administration can continue to provide essential services like healthcare and education. What that means from my perspective is that, if there's going to be major infrastructure built in the next decade in Ecuador, they're going to have to start gearing, and catering more towards the requirements of private investment. And these contractual securities that we look for are something that's kind of always a long negotiation, 1 year, 2 year, however long it takes to put in place. And it's sort of, Ecuador doesn't really have the time for that now. And so you can see a couple projects coming before the legislature. One is the APP project, which is an interesting public-private partnership law that is being worked on by the BID and actually the U.S. Treasury. And the idea of that is that should expedite the sort of that relationship you need between government and these private investments in order to create those contractual securities, which will allow for the investment. Because when you don't have these contractual securities, one of two things happen. Either the investments fall down and they don't arrive and you don't get that infrastructure built out in time. And we've certainly seen that in Ecuador over the last, at least the last decade that I've been here. I've seen many projects that have never been built out. The other result is that the lack of that contractual security is reflected in the prices. And so energy prices, wastewater treatment plants, anything else, because there's more risk, the debt is going to be more expensive and the equity is going to require a higher return. That's a long way of saying that we just can't offer the same price that we could elsewhere. And so the effect of that is, of course, the Ecuadorian public has to pay more for those services, unfortunately. And so in order to, sort of that's the biggest change I'm looking on the horizon. So what am I looking for in Ecuador on the horizon? I'm looking for top-down regulation and law and constitutional changes that will allow for ministries to later go out and promote projects that we desperately need in Ecuador. New wastewater treatment plants, highway refurbishments, energy projects like the ones that we're promoting with more ease, because usually the ministries are trying their best to get these across. And I'm not, I'm apolitical with that respect. I'm talking about every administration I've dealt with sort of in the last more than a decade here has been kind of strapped by these concepts that private investment is an exception to the rule in Ecuador. Well, I'm not saying it needs to become the rule, but if we're going to try to get through the next decade, building long-term projects, promoting private investment, which hopefully has a carry-on effect for those other entrepreneurs and professionals in Ecuador, well then, it's time to really sort of start promoting those laws, regulations, and contracts that are required for that investment. And that's what I'm looking for over the next, over the next cycle from now until the next election. Of course, will be very interesting as to what party comes back into place. That's going to play a massive role in the philosophy of the party that's putting these rules and regulations into place. And when we see those rules and regulations, I think it will become quite clear as to whether or not the course that Ecuador is choosing is one that is governments taking the reins and continuing to build out the majority of infrastructure, and that's fine, but quite difficult today for Ecuador. It's going to be so indebted. It's going to be difficult for it to service its foreign debt. Is it a very geared towards private industry, in which case you need to make sure you're having the proper competitive tenders so that the prices come down and you really get that benefit, that impulse to the economy without creating contracts that are too favorable? Or is it going to be something in the middle, kind of that public-private partnership balance? And so I think that's what I'll be looking for the next 6 to 12 months. We're very hopeful that working, that the government today and the government tomorrow is going to be looking for this type of investment. We think it's to a certain extent inevitable because there's not going to just not enough money to get the infrastructure in place. I mean, you can't play around with wastewater treatment. You can't play around with access to fresh water, and especially with the majority of the economic growth and population growth in Ecuador is obviously centered around 4 city centers right now. So we're certainly hoping that will be the case, and obviously the 𝐂𝐻𝐿 as a company is quite optimistic about the long-term prospects for Ecuador. Otherwise we wouldn't be in the country, and we hope that this year and next year we kick off these 2 major projects that we hope to win, and it will be an impulse to the economy short term in terms of the influx of capital, but creating that new market, something like renewable energy, which we've seen elsewhere in the United States has become one of the largest employer growth, and in other places around the world. Our hope is that, to be frank, we're creating a new industry which is going to sort of bolster that Ecuadorian economy, because I mean, we got to call it as it is. I've never seen an economy as in much trouble as Ecuador is today, and that goes for a lot of countries around the world. And so we need to make very strong steps towards sort of a better public-private relationship. So that's my perspective, and I'll pause there.
Yeah, Noel. So you are with your company since the beginning, right? In Ecuador.
Yeah. So in Ecuador, I owned an energy development company, which I later sold, and then I've just recently, in the last year, been recruited by 𝐂𝐻𝐿, who's a much bigger player. So that's how I moved sort of from the entrepreneurial sort of point of view until now really being in one of the major industrial leaders. And so I've only been with 𝐂𝐻𝐿 since last September, but I've been in the energy industry in Ecuador in and out for about a decade.
All right, but in general terms, in Ecuador, do you see the solar panels for houses or for small developments? Because there is from my own experience, there is a development here, well, more than one, on the coast, where one of the challenges that they're facing is the energy. So it is very expensive for them on having the CNL company bringing all the wires, the electric poles for that. So there is a solution for those type of developments. I'm speaking about the coast because it's where I'm more familiar, but I know those type of projects, the developments where they don't have access to electricity in other parts of Ecuador.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like the shrimping industry, to be honest. But the answer to everything when it comes to energy is going to be if the regulation's in place. I think that it's kind of like the field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. And so if the Ecuadorian government turns its focus to allowing there to be, more direct relationship between companies that need that energy and energy producers, then I think that you'll see in places where it makes sense, you know, the renewable energy will be able to compete. I think we're still going to have poles and wires and maybe batteries for some of those projects. And if you're talking about people putting it on their rooftop, I mean, it's going to be hard to compete with what the operator will sell you today, unless there's something like, you know, net metering and which would allow you to sell extra energy back to the grid and stuff like this. And so currently the Ecuadorian regulation is not set up for us to come in and replace the distribution companies as energy providers. It's just not the way the regulation is currently written, although it's starting to trend towards that. But you know, sometimes governments are jealous of having their, you know, the industrial commercial players, which are some of the most frequent payers, you know, taken out of their payment stream and put into mine. It's just one example, right? And so even though we could probably, you know, where the sun shines quite brightly or the wind blows a lot, we could probably provide a cheaper kilowatt hour, cheaper energy, cleaner energy, you know, in the middle of a global climate crisis, which I think is probably the right aim. We could probably do that on, you know, for some of those industries and bring them that energy. But the fact of the matter is that today there's not that private to private sort of regulation in place that allows us to replace those distribution companies and get them those kilowatt hours. And so there is a rooftop regulation coming through that you know, I think you'll see some smaller companies start putting solar on their roof, and they might do it because they're trying to support the, you know, the shift towards renewable energy, and they might do it because there is an economic case for it in spite of not having a true net metering, and sort of which allows you to use the grid energy back and forth. As your energy goes down, you're allowed to pour energy in from the grid. But so I mean, the short answer is it depends on regulation. And the second short answer is if the regulations changed in the right way, then there's definitely going to be an opportunity for renewable energy to come into Ecuador and make a big, you know, a big change for, especially for your larger industrial players. Less so, I'd say, for your small residential players.
Okay, I have another question here from our attendees, but I'm going to summarize it. Basically, what it says is Ecuador is very dependent on oil for its budget, and the budget price is always changing. So, do you see Ecuador going towards, because you are in this business, and I mean you're basically, we can call you an expert in this matter. So, do you think Ecuador will be changing to renewable energy, or it will keep having the oil as the normal?
Yeah, so be weary of anyone that will call themselves an expert in the energy industry, because I can tell you that, you know, 9 out of 10 times, even those of us who live inside of it get it all wrong. And so here's what I can tell you is that in Ecuador already 80 to 85% of it's grid-based energy. So don't think about cars driving around, think about charging your cell phone and turning your lights on. It's already actually based on hydropower. And so, you know, because of that, there's actually a fairly clean mix of energy already in Ecuador, and the remaining part of the energy does come, you know, from not the cleanest sources of thermal energy. The government budget is a separate issue because, you know, there's not enough refining capacity in Ecuador, and so generally, you know, Ecuador's in this odd situation where it exports a certain amount of its crude oil, and it actually imports a refined product, and then it subsidizes that product which is purchased at the pumps. You know, which I think a lot of people have said, hey, that's not a great mix for your budget, and they're probably right. You know, but then you do have a long history of that subsidy baked inside of export products, including to a certain extent flowers, but more you have to think about the fruit industries and stuff like that. And so, you know, you saw what happened when they tried to take that subsidy away. Instead of stepping it or finding a replacement to ensure that Ecuadorian products were competitive in the market, or easing the pain, you saw what happened when they tried to sort of make a mass replacement of that oil subsidy. It wasn't politically popular, and I don't think you can blame people for not wanting to suffer that brusque of a change, you know. And so what's the long-term projection for Ecuador is that, hey, look, you know, with the amount of resources between hydro, wind, and solar in this country, in 100 years from now, I'm willing to predict that you know, the energy is all coming from clean sources, although we're one of the cleanest, you know, grids today. What's going to happen with the oil industry? I mean, I think the government would do wise to find additional income streams outside of a very, very volatile product. It's been extremely harmful to Ecuador for the last 20, 30, 40 years to be living and dying by the price of oil, and it's becoming ever the more volatile, over the last, call it 12 years. And so it would be wise to move away from that dependency, but at the same time, that's going to take a lot of time, and so you can be sure that the Ecuadorian budget for the next 5 years, whether it balances or not, to a great extent, is going to recover on the back of the oil price, if indeed it does recover. And so the long-term protection for Ecuador, economically and energy-wise, I think is fantastic. If you look at the amount of resources we have here, not only from a renewable standpoint, but also from an agricultural standpoint, and from even a mining standpoint. There's so many resources, but the short-term outlook for Ecuador is kind of like a little bit more of the same for a little longer, in my humble opinion.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Noel. Jason, I would like to have the last final words from you, since we have been basically working in this project, which is how this started. Was like we wanted to bring information from firsthand people who are working actually in Ecuador, and not just based on social media, what social media is saying. So Jason, I really would like to have from you some final words based on your experience here, being a U.S. citizen, but I personally know you, and you feel identified with the Ecuadorian culture. You are one of one of my friends who live here, and they integrate to the local culture, making friends with Ecuadorians, going to the small tienda, living a normal life, which you have. I mean, you have known how to integrate to Ecuador very well. So for our attendees, I would like to ask you for the last, for a message for them about how it is to be Jason here in Ecuador.
Well, I'd rather not speak specifically about myself. Thank you, by the way, Marcos, for your kind words. But I'd rather talk about a takeaway from today's webinar. What we tried to accomplish today is show, 3 different segments of the Ecuadorian, essentially the people doing business in 3 different segments in Ecuador. So, we've got an entrepreneurial perspective from Paty, myself with an established industry that exports to Western countries, and Noel doing large-scale development. So the takeaway that I would like to impart on today's audience is that, albeit there's been some difficulties doing business during COVID, in the same breath, I think that the businesses that operate in Ecuador and are dependent on Western countries or local markets like Paty, for example, are willing to make the necessary changes to adjust, to shift, to adhere to new procedures, this nomenclature, this new normal that we're entering into shortly. So the takeaway is, yes, we've been affected. Yes, the economy is, like Noel mentioned, going to go through some rough patches, but I think the perseverance and the resiliency of, whether they be expats or Ecuadorians or a mix of both doing business in Ecuador are going to find creative solutions to move forward and, find creative ways to fight our way out of this economic difficulty that we're going to experience post-COVID. So, I'm optimistic. I think that Ecuador has all the resources and opportunities to do so, and it's going to take some, some leaders and some creativity and some, some real drive and push to get us out of this.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, Noel. Thank you, Paty. Thank you, Jason. We're running out of time, and it has been very, very enlightening for all of us. I really enjoyed it, and I know our attendees, they did. We just received an email saying that keep up the great work. So thank you so much, guys. Have a nice afternoon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Muchas gracias.